For many years, there have been many different stories told about how the Americas came to be. There are always two sides of the story, those of the Europeans and those of the indigenous people. During this time in the 16th century, there were many people who played a role in the history we are learning about in today's classes. The first person is Hernando Cortez. He was from Spain and was sent by the king to explore the land we now know as Mexico. The people he found there were called the Mexica. Hernando wrote letters to the king about the Mexica and what he had found, but in many of his letters he talked about the Mexica in a bad light. He wrote in one, "They have another horrible and abominable custom worthy of being punished and worse than anything seen anywhere else." He needed to talk this way so the king would send more money and goods. These letters are some of the only ways we know about this conquest to spread Spain's ways into the Mexicas. Bernal Diaz was another person who was important in this conquest because he wanted to write the true history of the conquest of New Spain. He wanted to set the record straight about the first encounter of the Mexica and the Spanish. Although this was his goal, he failed to get the perspective of the indigenous people. His records were a lot less harsh on the Mexica, but nonetheless, these two writings were in the perspective of the Spanish. One topic that was very controversial when it came to the East versus the West was religion. On the facing west side, John Eliot translated and published a dialogue between Pambuco and his unconverted relatives. Pambuco would speak most of the time during this dialogue and would talk down to his relatives for not wanting to convert to Christianity. He goes on to say to his relatives, "I abhor to taste the most filthy and stinking dung, the sour scrapes or most bitter gall." He is saying he would never want to believe in what they do and comparing it to dung and other gross things. He is trying so hard to show them that Jesus Christ should be their God, but he is doing it in a very harsh way that his relatives don't respond well to. On the facing east perspective, Christian Leclerc translated a speech given by a Mi'kmaq elder to a group of French settlers. This speech was basically a response to the conversation their relatives had about religion. He says he cannot believe the French are so clueless to who they are as a society. He is astonished they compared themselves to hell. "Thou sayest of us also that we are the most miserable and most unhappy of all men living without religion," he says. The elder begs them to believe how no matter how miserable they look to the French, that they are happier without them than they ever will be with them. Another big difference in perspectives was with economy. It is very apparent in Victors and Vanquished that when Cortez was trying to explain their lives to the king, which included their clothing, food, houses, and work, he wanted to take what they had but didn't want to come out and say it straightforward. He thought if they inserted themselves into the economy, it could be better. On the Mexica's perspective, they were so intrigued by all the Spanish were bringing over and showing them, like their guns and horses, they didn't realize their true intentions, which in the end is what led to their defeat in the war. In the end, you can see in the facing east perspective, all that was there was curiosity of the new people traveling to their land. And in the facing west perspective, we see their intentions of exploiting the natives and their land.